For the adults, I got to tell you, it'd be way easier to continue to talk about missionaries to you than it is the topic that I think is in the gospel, this issue of service. And it starts with this kind of interesting little incident. James and John go to Jesus and they sort of want to take some power, some glory, some honor by getting these particular seats, sitting at Jesus' left and right. Now, in our culture, we see that a little bit, maybe at weddings, who sits at the head table, but we're not really caught up in this like they would have been in Jesus' day. So you have to understand that what Peter and James are asking for, this is a big deal. Because think about it, if you are next to Jesus when he is ruling, as they put it, when he comes into his glory, well, if you're next to Jesus, hey, that makes you pretty good. And so you're guaranteed to get lots of honor and praise and all that stuff. And you're also going to get some power because Jesus is likely to turn to you and say, why don't you go and take care of that? And then you get to go say, hey, Jesus told me to tell you. So what they're after matters to them. And it seems like it matters to the 10 as well, the other disciples. Because you notice they're upset that James and John tried to get these two places. And the only reason the 10 would be upset is because they also want that same things. They wanted those places for themselves. And as I was thinking about this, you realize that probably for most of us, probably all of us, this is in us too. And so when Jesus starts talking to them about, hey, here's what you need to do, I think he's talking to us. Because again, maybe I'm the only one, but I sense this in me, this idea that we kind of want to be known and to be appreciated and be popular, that sort of stuff. So much of social media is gathered around, you know, if you run something about likes and followers and all that sort of stuff, because it says something about how you're doing. And who doesn't want some power to get some things done, things that you think should be done? So when Jesus comes up with his answer for these guys, I think we need to listen to it. And the answer, I think, takes kind of two parts to it. Part of it, I think Jesus is saying, hey, this kind of, well, maybe for some, obsession with gaining power and prestige and honor and glory, you need to let that go, because that's not going to help you. It looks like that's what would work, and certainly our society teaches us that, oh, that's the way to success. But Jesus, I think, is saying, that's actually not going to get you what you really ultimately want. It may get you what you think you want, but it's not going to get you the abundant life that Jesus wants for us. But the other part of his, I guess, solution or his advice, if you want to think of it that way, to the disciples, is I think he's pointing out that service actually does something. Service works. Now, in the culture of the day, that would not make a lick of sense to any of the 12. Because the only people in that day and age that you'd want to serve were people that were above you, if you will, on the social scale, the social ladder. Because you'd serve them because the thinking was, well, if I do something good for them, maybe they'll help me and raise me up a little bit in social standing. So in the day of the disciples of Jesus, nobody is going to help anybody below them because they can't do anything for you. And so when Jesus says, hey, what you really want to do is you want to serve people, everybody. I think the disciples are just kind of looking at each other going like, did Jesus get a good night's sleep last night? And indeed, you might be thinking the same thing about me, because in our culture, I mean, tell me a place in our culture where you find people saying, oh, I think the way to get things done is to serve. We are taught the opposite. You know, we're in the midst of an election, and elections are, in many ways, all about gaining power. And so we are constantly bombarded with this idea of, well, I gotta get some standing, I gotta get some power, whether it's in a big election or even if it's in the office. If the committee I'm working on, well, if I could be the chair of that committee, then I could direct and make sure that the committee does what it's supposed to do. But Jesus doesn't agree. And before I get too much farther, I just would point you to the cross behind me. That was Jesus's way of getting something done. And on Good Friday, you got to realize that anybody looking at Jesus hanging on the cross was thinking like, okay, well, that didn't work. I mean, Jesus, the Messiah of God, got killed by his enemies. That was most people in that day. I would think most people would just say that was a failure. Oops, that didn't work. But Jesus, at the end of the gospel reading, says, I came to serve. I came to serve. That's my toolbox. That's my strategy. So take two examples. Take just an office example. Hopefully, maybe somebody here is this person. Maybe, I hope you've met a person like this. But they work in the office and they are devoted to the business. They are happy to do a few extra things to make things go a little better. So they'll clean up the break room just so that people won't argue about who's supposed to clean up the break room, because if the team is arguing, they're not as good. They'll do extra things, small things, not even tell anybody about it, just small things to make the office be a little nicer place to work and maybe a little better so that the business thrives a little bit more. Now, you'd appreciate that heart of service. That's terrific. We would admire that. But what's it get this person? Maybe you would think that, well, the way things normally go, it gets this woman or this guy they get passed over for promotions because they're not being forceful. They're not grabbing the spotlight like James and John are here. And if that's your attitude, you can't really get ahead. But if you've ever met somebody like this, you realize that they don't want to get ahead. I mean, it's not that they'll turn down a promotion or a raise, and oftentimes that happens. But they are content because they know that the kind of life I want to live is a life of service. That's what makes me happy. I don't want to be stressed out like all these people who are trying to climb over other people and stab people in the back in order to get whatever they think they're after. And let me offer a second example. I need to tell you up front, some of you might hear this as a little controversial. Please understand that's not my intention in any way. And I will tell you, it's just a thought, a question that I'm not sure that I know the answer to, nor I'm quite sure you can't find an answer to it. But it's just a thought along these lines. For the last several years, I've been thinking back about how it is that the Christian people handled the Roe versus Wade abortion decision. What did we do? Catholics, Protestants, what was our response when abortion became legal throughout the country? And it seems to me we did two things. One, we served. We set up clinics, especially crisis pregnancy centers, and we helped women as we could, and that was, I think, a wonderful thing. I suspect Jesus would have thought that, oh, terrific, so happy that you're doing that. But that wasn't all that we did. I suspect no one sat down and mapped this out as a big strategy sort of thing. I think we just sort of fell into it. That while we were doing the service thing, it was almost like there was a part of us that was like, well, that's good, we should do that. But, that's not actually going to get anything done. That's not actually going to change anything. And so what we need to do is we need to get some power. And so we began a campaign of spending enormous amounts of time and money and effort millions and millions and millions of dollars. And we did Right for Life marches, and we organized campaigns, and we tried really, really hard to get the people elected who were going to pass laws that we thought needed to be passed and defeat laws that we thought needed to be defeated. So here's my question. What if we had taken all of that money, all that time and money and resources, the millions and millions and millions of dollars, what if we had taken every dime of that and put it into service? What if all we had done from the moment the Roe versus Wade decision that came down is we said, oh, okay, we're just going to serve? As I think about that, I just wonder if every community, even a little place like Ruskin, would have a clinic available. Something like is a place up in North Tampa that I know about. It started out as a crisis pregnancy center, but they have over the years grown, and they are now basically a regular doctor's office. That they use the profits that they get from treating normal things, if you will, to help expectant mothers, crisis pregnancy, all that kind of stuff. They're basically a non-profit sort of clinic. It's a terrific place. Wouldn't it be wonderful if a place like that was, say, just up the street where the bank used to be? Because then, as you and I came across people who needed those kind of service, we'd say, oh, hey, you just need to go right down there. They could take care of it. But all those millions of dollars, I just wonder if that would have funded all of that. And then what would have happened? Would we have ended abortion? No, I don't think so. Abortion was going on before Roe versus Wade when it was illegal. I suspect it would still be going on. How many would there be? I don't know. You can't do that with history. You can't conjure a question like I just did and know how it would have turned out. Perhaps you might think it would have been a disaster. I don't know. What I do know is that Jesus is right. Like he's always right. And even though things like this, where we look at this and say, Jesus, you gotta be nuts. Like you can't get anything done just by serving people. You gotta get some power. You gotta get things done. Like that's how things work. I just think if Jesus just looks at us with love and maybe a little bit of, I know, but would you just trust me on this? Would you just go serve people and see what happens? It's hard to trust Jesus on things like this that don't make any sense to us. But I don't know about what your experience is with the Lord. It's just that I know for myself, my own experience, that Jesus has never let me down. He's never been wrong. Every time I follow what he wants me to do, it works out really well. And every time I don't follow, it doesn't work out so well. And so I got to think, as hard as this is for me to wrap my head around it, and I've been trying to for some years, I just have to remind myself, I guess Jesus is right. I guess the way forward about anything, whether it's your office, your family, whatever is going on in your and our lives, whatever that is, the way forward is not to go grab power. The way forward is to serve.